Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating mystery. What actually drives a civilization forward? And we aren't just talking about economics or politics here. We're diving deep into the hidden links between a society's intimate relationship norms and its overall cultural drive. We're going to be looking at some incredible research that spans thousands of years of human history, right down to the literal neurobiology in our brains today. It's this brilliant intersection of history and science. So let's just jump right in. So let's start with this macro question, a historical mystery that has honestly puzzled anthropologists for decades. Why do prosperous civilizations, societies that have surged with creativity, scientific discovery, and organizational power, why do they suddenly just lose their energy and focus? It's so easy to assume that civilizations just naturally age and fade out, or that they're always conquered by outside forces. But what if the engine of a civilization's energy is actually found in something much more intimate? What if it's tied directly to the structural norms of its families and relationships? Well, this brings us to British anthropologist J.D. Unwin. Back in 1934, he made this incredibly bold claim. After doing some extensive research, he wrote, "Any human society is free to choose either to display great energy or to enjoy sexual freedom. The evidence is that it cannot do both for more than one generation." I mean, wow, right? Unwin argued that when a society places a socially enforced check on sexual impulses, that tension is effectively converted into what he called social energy. And that's the drive that leads to long-term thinking, building, exploring, and inventing. And the thing is, Unwin didn't just guess at this. His 1934 study, published in his book Sex and Culture, was massive. He rigorously and impartially analyzed 80 primitive tribes and 6 known civilizations, tracking a staggering 5,000 years of human history. Through all of this data, he found a distinct, positive correlation between a society's cultural achievements and its adoption of absolute monogamy. He actually noted that in all of human records, there is literally no case of an absolutely monogamous society failing to display great cultural energy. To really understand why this macro-historical trend occurs, we have to zoom in on biology and Darwinian evolution. Let's talk about pair bonding. Human children are born extremely vulnerable, right? They require massive long-term investment just to survive and thrive. Pair bonding evolved as a biological commitment device to ensure that early hominins stayed together to provide that absolutely crucial biparental care. So it's not just some religious or cultural rule. It is a deeply ingrained evolutionary survival strategy. And modern science absolutely backs up this history. Neurobiologists actually study this using the prairie vole. They're these remarkably monogamous little rodents that form lifelong bonds, share parenting duties, and fiercely guard their mates. They're basically the gold standard for rodent romance, and studying them has unlocked the actual chemical formula for commitment in the mammalian brain. So the crucial takeaway here is that this isn't just a cultural preference. It is an evolutionary mechanism driven by specific neurochemicals. You've got oxytocin, which promotes positive communication and trust. It's what makes you feel bonded. Then you have vasopressin, which is heavily linked to paternal behavior and protecting the family unit. And then there's dopamine, the reward chemical, which assigns what scientists call motivational salience to your specific partner, meaning it literally wires your brain to view your partner as the ultimate prize. When a society embraces monogamy, it's essentially leaning into this highly evolved neurochemical commitment device. Moving right along to Section 1, the sturdy house and understanding the 3-generation delay. So you might be wondering, why doesn't a permissive society just collapse overnight? Well, think of a really sturdy house built by your grandparents, with thick foundations and strong beams. If you inherit that house and start knocking down load-bearing walls to throw parties, the house won't fall immediately, right? It's got strong bones. Unwin called this the 3-generation delay. He warned that it takes exactly 3 generations for a shift in sexual opportunity to have its full cultural effect. Generation 1 loosens the rules, but they feel fine because they still have this moral muscle memory. They were raised with habits of delayed gratification and duty. Generation 2 grows up in a transition period, kind of confused by divided standards. By Generation 3, the new permissive norms are just the default. The old discipline is completely gone, and that is exactly when the social energy drops. Basically, the people cashing the check are not the ones paying the bill. Let's look at Section 2, the modern sociological data, focusing on America's sexual revolution. If we apply this macro-historical framework to the United States today, we can trace a major cultural shift starting right around the 1960s. This was the era that really began uncoupling sex from marriage and childbearing. If Unwin's three-generation theory holds true, we should be seeing the deeper cultural effects right about now. And look at this. In 1960, just 5.3% of U.S. births were to unmarried women. By 1990, that number had climbed to 28%. And by 2023, according to the CDC, it reached a staggering 40%. We are literally watching the timeline unfold exactly as the anthropological data suggested it would. Furthermore, to put that into perspective, the U.S. Census Bureau reports that married couple households made up 71% of all households in 1970. By 2022, that number had dropped to just 47%. When less than half of your households are anchored by a married couple, you aren't just observing a minor cultural trend, you are witnessing a radically different civilization pattern. And this data matters deeply because of what we call the cascade effect. When sex is viewed as free and uncoupled from commitment, marriage inherently becomes fragile. When marriage is fragile, childbearing becomes unstable. And when childbearing is unstable, the resulting generation arrives less equipped for long-term discipline. They're deprived of that essential intergenerational infrastructure we talked about that teaches self-control. This is exactly how a society loses its dynamic energy without a single invader ever crossing its borders. Finally, Section 3, reversing the decline and creating a structural shift for moral renewal. Okay, the good news here is that Unwin explicitly noted this decline is reversible. He pointed to historic Arab civilizations that tightened their norms, reduced casual sexual opportunity, and actually regained massive cultural energy. But regaining that lost social energy requires a serious structural rebuild. It is not just a casual, let's all be nicer campaign. And crucially, we cannot go backward. Unwin pointed out that the old civilizational patterns often relied unfairly on the subjugation of women, treating them as legal non-entities. That injustice eventually helped break the system. Therefore, the new civilizational prescription, our path forward, requires complete legal equality combined with a moral culture that demands serious mutual restraint from everyone. Equal dignity plus disciplined boundaries. To actually enact this cultural recovery today, the sociological, biological, and Darwinian evidence suggests several concrete structural changes. First, we have to renormalize marriage first as the default path to adulthood. Second, we must protect children from explicit content and early sexualization. Childhood innocence is basically the construction zone for future discipline. We need a cultural shift where it's seen as deeply uncool or frankly cringe to be a gooner constantly consuming unrestrained explicit content. Third, we have to improve economic and housing stability so young people can actually afford to form families. And fourth, while fiercely protecting abuse victims, we need to culturally treat divorce as a tragic last resort, rather than just a casual, frictionless exit. To wrap up our explainer today, I want you to consider this. Unwin's theory challenges the modern idea that all limits are inherently bad. In reality, limits are the foundation that builds freedom. Sexual restraint and committed pair bonding are what makes societies capable of long effort, real sacrifice, and deep culture. So, looking at all the evidence from biology and human history, we really have to ask ourselves, what kind of future will we choose to build? Do we want the kind of people and the kind of future that only disciplined love can produce? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.